Hello there, dear viewers, and welcome to haQ. Someone in my audience has a sick mind, just like me, and they'll do anything for a really slow LFO. And I can tell you right now that there is a perfect plugin, and it is mLFO. Now, the awesome thing with mLFO is that you don't just have one of them. If I go out of here, you can see that there's 16 of these LFOs. All of them can have their own individual rates, their own individual MIDI CCs, their own individual outputs and MIDI channels. They can have their own individual waveforms. It's insane what you can do with this thing. And if you're into ambient music and you don't have mLFO, what are you doing? Now, your DAW or your audio MIDI mixer is going to need support for MIDI plugins because this is not a regular AUV3 plugin. So right now we're inside AUM, which does have support for MIDI plugins. So we're going to add a MIDI track, go in here, pull this down, search for mLFO, and there we go. So we're going to open this up and pull it down here. mLFO has 16 LFOs, and right now you can only see one of them going, and yeah, it's going right now because mLFO is being triggered by the DAW or the host, and you can actually set that to a keyboard mode where you're triggering it with a note on a keyboard. Now, to actually do settings inside an LFO, you have to tap on it, so that's what we're gonna do. And here we see a multitude of controls, and beginning on this row we have an on-off button right here. Here we have the waveform selector, and if we tap it, we can see that we have sine, triangular, square, and sawtooth. Now, if we pull the list up, we have even more. Reverse sawtooth, 3 different types of ramp, and also random. Now, to exit a screen, you tap X. Next, we have something called beats. And so if we tap it, we get this right here. Now, what you need to know is the higher the number you're running, the slower the LFO will go, basically. And basically what you're typing in are divisions or multiplications of the beat, and it's all locked to the tempo of the host. Now, you don't even need to use the knobs in this one because you could just type your stuff in here, but I always go for knobs anyway because it just feels more musicy. Now, whenever you type anything in one of these boxes, you have to press save afterwards for the changes to actually take effect. And next we have the CC setup. So here you set up what CC number you want the LFO to be using. Exit out of here. Next we have the MIDI channel, and you can set it from channels 1 to 16. After that we have the outputs, and if we go into the matrix here of AUM, we can see that we have 16 individual outputs from mLFO, and these are the outputs that this thing is referring to. So if we go back to mLFO and we look at the outs, when we tap it, it actually says output 1 to 8, but I think it's a misprint because I've tried sending the output to 16, and if I do that again, press save and open up the matrix here, we can see that the output is going out at 16. So I just think it's a misprint, and you can actually set this to anything from 1 to 16 and not 1 through 8. Now, the next thing we have here is the trigger source. And as you can see, it's triggered by the host, meaning the LFOs will all start running as soon as you press play in your host. But you can also set this to be triggered by note 60 on a keyboard. I'm going to set it back to host so it's running. Now, the next row underneath is where we set up our speeds and our sensitivities or signal strengths. So we got a phase control over here, which just shifts the phase of the waveform. And then we have the maximum value here. And as you can see, when I'm putting it down, it doesn't move up as much. And we also have the minimum value like that. And these can also be set up together, of course, to have it move wherever we want it to move. And After that, we come to the actual controls that you want to know about. So the first control here divides the beats, making the LFO go faster, basically. Now it's going so fast that it looks as if it's going backwards. But yeah, this thing can run really, really, really fast. Now, for those of you who wants this thing to run slowly, this is the first controller that you want to have a look at, because we can pull this all the way up to times 31, and this makes the LFO go slower. But there are more controls for making this go even slower. Now, before we go to the next page and actually have a look at that, we also have something called rate here, where we can type in some more regular rates. All right, so we're gonna access this and press this button here to get to this page. So really quickly, you have a probability mode so that you can get the LFO to move in an unpredictable way. And you basically set the maximum of that here and the minimum of that here, and then you have to make sure that the probability is also pulled up, and you're gonna get an unexpected behavior from your LFO. Now, with that explained, these are the controls we are interested in if we want the LFO to run slowly. So here we have a times 10, and as you can see, we can hardly see the dot moving, but it's definitely moving, right? Well, if that's not slow enough for you, then we have a times 100, and then we have this one that is times 1,000. And I'm not sure if it actually will take 1,000,000 years for it to do a cycle. It might actually take shorter, but I thought it was a good title. So if you want a really slow LFO, you just can't go slower than this. So I think I've delivered what I promised anyway, even though it might not take 1,000,000 years. Now, there are a few more controls that we can go through here, and that's basically up here. You can switch between the LFOs. So you have 16 LFOs that you can flip through. So that's what you do with these buttons. Next, we have an editing button here where we can type in a name for our LFO. So I'm just going to name this one slow and save it. And there you see, slow. We also have a copy. And if we copy it like that and go to the next LFO and press P, then we're pasting it in there, like that. And then we have a question mark, which basically gives us a little bit of information about the stuff in here. And then lastly, we have the exit button. Now, there is one more thing you might want to know about this. If we go into an LFO here, we can actually enlarge controls by tapping on them. So if I tap in the middle of minimum here, then it opens up like this. Now, as you can see, there are no X buttons or anything. So if you want to close this down and zoom out, you have to tap in the middle of the knob one more time like this, and you're out. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There is also a list in here so that you can see like an overview of all of your LFOs and what CCs and how they're being triggered and everything. Everything shows here, so you can just flip through some pages and see that. All right, so setting up mLFO with an actual synthesizer. Now, I've chosen Moog Model D because it has some really smooth controls. So you can use LFOs that are really slow with the cutoff frequency, for instance, without having it sounding stepped, which is really nice. Ambient people, are you listening? All right, so to actually map something in here, we need to tell Moog Model D to listen to mLFO right now. So we go up here where we can find our MIDI settings, and we make sure that we open up the MIDI sources. And right here we can find mLFO. Now, if we open this up and we select the first output, we can now go back and map stuff. But here is where you have to think, because if you've got multiple LFOs running, like I've got right now, I've got LFO 1 running with MIDI CC20 and LFO 2 running with another MIDI CC value, well, both of them are going into Model D at the same time. And so if we want to make sure that we're mapping the right controller, we need to turn one off. And if you have several LFOs on, you need to turn them off. You need to make sure that you have that one LFO running so that you can catch the right controller. So I'm going to turn the second one off, jump back to the first one, and then I'm going to open up the MIDI settings again. And then I'm just going to go down here and find the cutoff frequency knob, which is right here. And now I'm just going to press learn on it. Now, you actually don't have to go through the list. You can use the quick MIDI learn mode, and we're going to do that for the next controller. I just want you to look at this beauty because the cutoff frequency can actually be seen moving around. And not all synths will actually show this movement, but Moog Model D will. So we're going to map another controller to the filter emphasis. And before we do that, we turn the first LFO off, go to the second one and turn it on. And now I'll show you the quick MIDI mapping mode. So press here and then activate the quick MIDI mapping mode right there. Now you can see a blue frame around the synth, and you can see this wagging little icon here, which means we're in MIDI learn mode. Any controller that we touch or flip or tweak is now gonna prompt us with a MIDI learn box. So I'm gonna map the filter emphasis by tweaking it, and there we have the box. And all I have to do now is to press MIDI learn because we've got the second LFO running, learn, and there we go. Press done when done, and as you can see, the filter emphasis is moving. If I now go back to the first LFO and turn it on, we can see that both controls are moving, and if I play it, now remember that you have the possibility of actually mapping the same MIDI CC to multiple controls inside a synth. And with that, you can actually build macros. And I have an entire video on how to build intricate macros. And if you want to see that, I've got the video in a card popping out in the upper right corner, and also a link down in the pinned comment, and also a link in the description, so you can find that. And all you have to do now, if you want to work with slow LFOs, is to, well, make them move slowly. And yeah, that's about it. Now, I do feel a little bit ashamed for typing a million-year cycle in the thumbnail. And the truth is that there's no million-year cycle in here. But it is a bit, it's click-friendly. So what I did was I did a proper test. So for those of you who want the real numbers, here's what I did. I took the 1000 knob here and I pulled it all the way up. I know I could have just typed it in, but it's just faster getting to the maximum number here by pulling a knob. And then I ran a sequence at 120 BPMs. Remember, this is tied to the BPM. So if I would have run it at 60 BPMs, it would have taken double the amount of time. Well, at 120 BPMs, letting it run for 4.5 hours, it got through here in a cycle, which is about a quarter. So a full cycle at this speed would have taken 18 hours. And I know it's not a million years, I get it. But 18-hour LFO cycle, that's very slow. Now, mLFO has had an interesting pricing life. It came out at $2.99. It was raised to what? $3.99, $4.99, $5.99, pulled down, $3.99. Just look at this on AppSlice. I don't know why it's just going up and down so widely, but even at the highest price, I still think it's worth the money, and I recommend it to anyone that wants a set of LFOs that they can do almost anything with. The only drawback here that I think that this thing has is that when you're resizing the thing, it doesn't zoom in, and I don't like that because sometimes I just want to make stuff larger, and so that would be a nice little thing if the developer made that happen. And the other thing I would love is for there to be like an FM feature where you could cross-modulate maybe LFOs and get some interesting waveforms out of them. But yeah, you can do a lot with this plugin, and I highly recommend it. If you like the work I do here on the channel, why don't you hit me with a like? If you want to support me in a financial way, go check out my music first. There's a link list in the pinned comment. If you don't want to do that, Patreon, PayPal. If you don't want to do any of it, that's fine too. As usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.